On May 2nd, get ready to escape. Isis, Escape from Transylvania. The goddess next door and John Haynes must escape a horde of vampires on the hunt in this horror-filled Isis series adventure. Get Isis, Escape from Transylvania in paperback and e-readers May 2nd. Recently, Steven Spielberg said that he was open to making Indiana Jones a woman. And as I see it, Steven Spielberg has gone SJW. And the reason why I say Steven Spielberg has gone SJW is because he's compromising the integrity of the concept of Indiana Jones, all in the name of diversity. Now, those of us who were kids when Indiana Jones came out, and those of us who understand the history of Indiana Jones, understand that Indiana Jones is a man for a reason. And the reason why Indiana Jones is a man for a reason is because Steven Spielberg was originally paying homage to the old serialized movies of the 1930s and the 1940s, like the old Batman serials, the Durango Kid serials, and many other serials like Shazam and Flash Gordon. And he was paying homage to those serials because he loved those serials, as watching those serials as a kid, and he wanted to stay true to the story of those old serialized films. And him making Indiana Jones a man fit within the framework of those old films. So him saying that he wants to make Indiana Jones a woman literally compromises the original mission he had when he made the original Indiana Jones films. And I believe that's not something you want to do when you go out here and make films. And the reason why I believe he wants to do this is, one, because he wants to force diversity into a place where he believes diversity is, and two, I believe he wants to do this in order to try to get a few more miles out of the Indiana Jones franchise. And I believe he's wrong on both points because, one, you don't need to go out here and tarnish the legacy of Indiana Jones, because Indiana Jones became an American icon because the films of Raiders of the Lost Ark and the other Indiana Jones movies beautifully paid homage to the old serials of the 1930s. And two, there's no need to go out here and make Indiana Jane, because that really shows that you're stuck in the past. Because if you really want to create something for this generation of kids out here, you want to make something that's an original concept. You don't need to make something tied to the past. And the reason why I believe he wants to make something tied to the past, because those were his best years and that was one of his best films, and he wants to try to keep the memory of it alive. But the way you keep the memory of a great series like Indiana Jones alive is by letting it stay true to itself. People will find old Indiana Jones movies and they'll see what's great about them, and they'll see what's great about them because they're able to stand on their own. Don't create some other character like Indiana Jane and tarnish that legacy. If you want to create a character that's a heroine, go out here and create an original heroine like I did when I created the Isis character and the E-Steam character back in 1999, and let them stand on their own, because that's how you make a strong heroine, and that's something many in Hollywood, especially those that are a part of the SJW crowd, just don't understand. When they all want to go out here and make these strong heroines, but oftentimes they fail because they execute the concept very poorly. And when I think an Indiana Jane would be an poorly executed concept, because you're taking a male hero and then you're trying to transpose a female onto it, not understanding that the story dynamics for men are completely different than the story dynamics for women. And the story concepts that you make for women are completely different than that for a man. And that's something many in Hollywood just don't understand, because when it comes down to many in Hollywood, they think they can just change the gender, but not understanding that you're going to have to change the story as well, because the type of action story that works for men does not work for women. And what I see with many of these films, like your Atomic Blondes and your Proud Marys, is that they want to try to transpose a man's story onto a woman, and then that leads to a woman being in a movie acting like a man and behaving masculine. And what that does is when people see that on the screen, they wind up getting turned off. And the reason why men wind up getting turned off is because they see this woman acting like a man. And the reason why women get turned off is because they see this woman behaving very masculine and they don't see any traits they can identify with. The men want to see an attractive, sexy woman that they can see as someone they would date or see somebody they want to have a relationship with. And the women want to see somebody who they believe could possibly be their friend. And it's hard to do that when you see these women who are incredibly masculine and they don't see that person. And because they don't see that person, they don't want to spend money on their films. And this is something that Hollywood hasn't understood. They're sitting up there trying to make this strong heroine and push strong heroines, not understanding, again, the story model is completely different, because the story model a writer would use for a man is one where he is trying to achieve these goals, and the villain is trying to put obstacles in front of him, or he's facing obstacles, and that relates to his logical frame of thinking. Whereas if you're going to write heroines, you're going to have to focus on more emotional perspectives, because when you write heroines, you have to really focus on relationships. And I noticed that when I was watching shows like Buffy the Vampire Slayer or Xena Warrior Princess, is that they focused primarily on relationships. And that's why those series resonated with large audiences of women. If we look at Buffy, she was always having these relationships, whether it would be with Angel or the Master or with Spike or whoever she was having as the central villain of the season. She always had relationships with these people. And that's one of the things that drew women in, because women are emotional and they wanted to see this rivalry go on. Or like when I watched Xena Warrior Princess, it really started to take off after the Xena and Callisto feud, because the Xena Callisto feud, what that did was it formed a relationship between Xena and Callisto, who was nearly her equal. And that's really what got people into the Xena series. Because I remember I was watching Xena, they were just doing stuff, but the things that got people in was that feud with Callisto and her relationship with Ares. So you have, whenever you're doing heroines, you're going to have action and adventure, but you're also going to have relationships. And another part of Xena was her friendship with Gabrielle. All those things are part of creating a heroine story, because a heroine story is more about her relationships and her friendships. But when I watch different movies, like your Proud Marys, like your Tomb Raiders, and like your Wonder Womans, I'm not really seeing that much focus on relationships. And when I write heroines, like when I'm writing ISIS books, I always focus on the relationships, because I know that that's a selling point to audiences of readers. And when I put ISIS series books out here, people like that part of it and they go out here and pick that up. Same thing when I do East-Team series books, I always focus on the relationships, and readers, both men and women, they go out here and they buy the books because it resonates with them, because they say that's more of a story related to a woman. And one of the big problems that Hollywood has been having is they want to go out here and make these action heroines, but they don't really have a really good execution of concept, because they're trying to write stories for women, but then the women are acting just like men. Because with Proud Mary, that was basically Luc Besson's The Professional, but it didn't work because Luc Besson's Professional was a male hero, and his story was related to him being a man. We didn't see what was good about Proud Mary, because she was so masculine acting that it was a turnoff. Just like when I was looking at the Tomb Raider trailer, that was a turnoff because they took out all of the femininity of Lara Croft out of the story in the hopes of making a strong woman. But the whole thing is that she was so physically masculine acting that it just didn't make you want to go watch the movie. Now, when I look at heroines again, people want to have that softness, they want to have some femininity, and those are things that people want. and they also want to see some relationships between the heroine and the people in her life. That's what's major. That's what's a major difference between your heroines and your hero. But Hollywood just doesn't understand this, and they believe that they can just give a woman a man's role and then just shoehorn her in it. And then what happens is it winds up failing at the box office. And the reason why it fails at the box office again is because males want to see an attractive woman they want to date, and females want to see a woman that they want to be their friend. And when they look at these characters, they don't see someone that they find attractive. And when it comes down to their stories, they don't see a character transformation arc that really resonates with them, because you have this woman trying to be a man and trying to be in a man's role instead of seeing what's great about being a woman. And when I was writing the Spinsterella trilogy, I wanted to show what was great about being a woman. And that one of the great traits is having the strength of character to stand up for yourself, the strength of character to stand up for what you believe in, and the strength of character to do what is right. And this is something that is really lacking from many of these stories that feature heroines, because when it comes down to the SJW, all they want to do is change the gender, but then they don't want to focus on the aspects of story. And that's one of the reasons why the new Star Wars trilogy is a complete disaster. Yes, we have Rey as a hero, but she's such a Mary Sue that she can do anything without any sort of hero's journey. And without that hero's journey, we don't see what's great about her, because the hero's journey is how the character shows how they change, how they transform, and how they become a completely different person than they were in the beginning of the story. But when it comes down to heroines, many writers, as I see it, they become so emotionally attached to the heroine that they don't want anything to happen to them. Unfortunately, that leads to a really terrible story, because if you don't let things happen to your character just cannot grow, and your character just cannot change. If I did not let the Matilda Crowley character experience things like getting beat up in Spellbound by Chantal and her girls, or watch her brother Brody get shot, or things like her getting into fights, or her getting beat by her mother in Legendary Mad Matilda, or things like happened to her in Spinsterella, she would never grow into a character. And if I did not let Isis get beat up by the Cyber Goddess in Wrath of the Cyber Goddess, her character would have never grown. And if I didn't let the Eastine character get beat up by Lucifer or witches, like she did in the Witches of Eastland, her character would have never grown. Because it's all those tragedies and losses, those are what make a character endear to us, because as we watch that character overcome these tragedies and losses and become a stronger person, that's what makes us see that character is great. And this is one of the big problems that many of these Hollywood producers have, is that they don't want their characters like their Rays or many others to go through that sort of pain or that sort of loss, because a lot of these producers, as I see it, some of the men, they want to protect the heroine from that type of hardship, but that leads to a very horrible viewing experience for the audience. The audience wants to see this character go through this sort of pain, go through this sort of loss, because that's what's going to endear us to that character. That's what's going to make that character relatable to us. And when I look at, guys like Steven Spielberg saying they want to make Indiana Jones a woman, what I see is an attempt to try to just keep the past going, and I see no real attempt at really creating a really original story. If he really wanted to create something great, I believe he would just let Indiana Jones be Indiana Jones, and then go out here, create a new character for this generation of kids, and let them have their own hero. Because if these kids have their own hero, then they'll be able to see that hero as an icon, and that hero can be the icon for the Gen Y, the Gen Z, and the millennial crowd, because they want their own characters. They don't want somebody else's characters from 30 years ago. They want their own stories being told to them. They want their own experiences presented to them, and they want to see their world presented to them. And when I see with these SJWs is that they want to take concepts that from somebody else's time or somebody else's place, try to shoehorn a female character in it in the name of diversity, and that literally presents a really half-done concept. When you really want to do is find out what the kids of today want and give them their own heroes and their own stories. Because if you give them their own heroes and their own stories, then maybe they'll have an incentive to go out here and spend money just to go to the movies and lead to these movies being the next generation of blockbusters. If you'd like to try the stories of the ISIS series, the E-Steam series, The Temptation of John Haynes, or the Spinsterella trilogy, you may do so by clicking the link to Amazon.com. And if you want to help me make more videos like this and pay for book covers, you can donate to my Patreon by clicking the link in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.